Good morning, everyone. It's lovely to see you all. So Al and Jenny started John 11 last week, and the start of John 11 was the story of the death of Lazarus. And so Julie and I are continuing with the same story this week. So the situation is that Lazarus has died, and Jesus has not yet intervened. Jesus has not yet done anything about it. In the Bible story today, we see how Jesus pastors Mary and Martha, and how he pastors them in the midst of their deep grief. They've just lost their brother. And we can learn from this story how Jesus is with us in the midst of our pain. And also we can learn how we can support and pastor other people when they face grief and when they face pain. So the title of the talk this morning is Truth and Tears. Truth and Tears. The ministry of Jesus is a ministry of truth and a ministry of tears. Jesus speaks truth to us, and Jesus weeps with us. And he calls us to speak truth to each other and to weep with each other when we face pain. So Julie is going to read to us from John 11, verses 17 to 37. And I don't know, what page is it on, Julie?
1078 in the Blue Bibles. So on his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. "Lord," Martha said to Jesus, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha answered, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she replied. "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world." After she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. "The teacher is here," she said, "and is asking for you." When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house comforting her noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have you laid him?" he asked. "Come and see, Lord," they replied. Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?"
I think it's just so powerful as we listen to that story that Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem. Many Jews had gone to visit Mary and Martha, but Jesus hadn't. And John is showing us that it was intentional. Jesus hadn't. Jesus had allowed them to wait. Jesus could have, and yet he hadn't gone yet to see them. And as Christians, we have to hold together the now and the not yet. As Christians, we know that Jesus died on the cross, and when he died on the cross, he defeated sin and death, but we still live with the consequences of sin. We still live with sickness and sadness and suffering. And we know that Jesus is going to come again. Jesus is coming again. And when Jesus comes again, all things will be put right. And we sometimes see miracles and breakthroughs now, But when Jesus returns, we will see all things put right. And in this story of Lazarus' death, we see the now and the not yet. Lazarus has died. We see the pain and the suffering. And yet throughout this passage, there's this thread of hope. There's this thread of hope. Lazarus' death didn't show that Jesus lacked power. Lazarus' death didn't show that Jesus lacked love. Again and again, as we face trials and grief and sadness, we need to hold together both the power of God and the love of God. We need to remember the truth that whatever we face, Jesus is Lord of all. Jesus has power. He has defeated sin and death. And we need to remember that he is with us and that he loves us. So first of all, Julie's going to come and speak to us about the interaction between Jesus and Martha. Jesus speaks truth to Martha. And then I'm going to speak in a moment about the interaction between Jesus and Mary. And Jesus ministers to Mary through tears. So Julie's going to speak.
Morning. So what are your if-onlys? If only I'd gone to the supermarket earlier, they may not have run out of my favourite donuts. If only I had worked a bit harder in my exams. If only we hadn't been on holiday that week. If only they hadn't been on that road at that time. If only a different president had been elected. If only. What happens when our expectations don't align with reality? When we become impatient in the waiting, when we've had enough and say we can't deal with this anymore, I'm done, I'm finished, I'm going to walk away, I don't need this. When we don't get what we want when we want it. The if only I had worked harder in my exams was me many years ago, when my results of my exams turned up on my doorstep. That isn't me, by the way, but I realised that all my hard work and revision and everything I had given up just hadn't been enough. That feeling of despair and grief of a path that I thought I was following came to an abrupt halt. I wasn't a Christian at the time, but looking back now, God had a plan. He had a slight variant in the pathway I was taking. But my expectations at the time didn't align with reality. It's that feeling of wanting to turn the clock back, to go back to the future and change your answers, your direction, your thought processes, so the outcomes of today and the future would be different. Some of you may remember the Back to the Future films that were made where Marty McFly, it was Michael J. Fox, and Emmett Doc Brown travelled back through history to change something in the past which would make the present and the future different. Or if any of you saw Sir Gareth Southgate this week on the Dimbleby lecture, I recommend it. I'm not a football fan, but it was very good. And if you just put the word Jesus in there, it would be a perfect sermon. He was asked if he would go back and score the penalty that he missed in the Euro 1996 games. Would his life be different now? And Gareth replied, he would have preferred to have scored it and won. He loved all the learning that came from the despair and the disappointment. But I might not be where I am today and learn what I've learned through it. Or I might have been more famous and more popular. It's a bit of a dream, really, isn't it? Nostalgia not for the past, but for the present that could have been different, the if only. God sees and knows the bigger picture. He knows what's right for us. He knows the life he wants us all to live. And God is aware of all our if-onlys, however big or small they seem to us. When we face difficulties or a crisis, who or what is our ultimate resource? Do we phone a friend? Do we see a counsellor? Do we go and have our hair done? Do we eat? Do we drink? You see, Mary and Martha faced a crisis. Lazarus, their dear brother, became sick. What could they do? Who would help them? Mary and Martha's ultimate resource in this time of crisis was Jesus. And we can learn so much from these two sisters, such a good example to us. The first and foremost thing, to turn to Jesus before anything or anyone else. They sent word to Jesus, their great friend who had a deep, deep love for Lazarus. Jesus, who was performing so many powerful miracles, would certainly be able to help come to their aid for Lazarus. But Mary and Martha's expectations didn't align with reality. And Jesus came 4 days after Lazarus had been placed in the tomb. They were facing great sadness and grief, frustration and anger maybe at Jesus' no-show. Word got to Martha that Jesus was entering Bethany, and true to form, she went out to meet him. She didn't wait for him to arrive in the house, she ran to him. I think I've heard this about Martha before, and I love Martha. Out of these 3 or 4 times that I've spoken in church, the stories of Mary and Martha have come up twice, so I have affinity with them. The Martha we all love cannot sit still. She has to be doing. She's impatient for the next thing, but she's impatient for Jesus to be there, impatient to speak to him. And in verse 21, Martha's words when she meets Jesus, "If you had been here," almost sounds like she's pointing the accusing finger at him. But for one moment, place yourself in Martha's shoes. Her brother had been ill, he had died, he was buried for 4 days, and then Jesus arrives. She was upset and angry. She had sent word to Jesus, and he hadn't come in time. And in the midst of all the waiting and disappointment, she stood in front of Jesus and his disciples and accused him. The great friendship between Mary, Martha, Lazarus, and Jesus looked to be in tatters. But what did Jesus do? He stood. He listened to Martha. He let her talk. He let her show her emotions without interrupting. But she did speak the truth. She probably knew in her head that Lazarus, he could have cured Lazarus. She probably also realised that Jesus took 2 days longer to arrive than she had hoped. If only. Wouldn't you be angry, frustrated, full of pain, disappointed? This great friend, healer, miracle worker, he hadn't bothered to show up when they needed him. "If only you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask," said Martha. I think she's still trying to process what has happened, trying to work things out in her mind. She's still holding out hope. Surely Jesus' prayers would be answered. Perhaps Martha doesn't know what to pray, but she hasn't found the right words. Jesus says in response in verse 23, "Your brother will rise again." And Martha answers, "I know he will rise on the last day." She knows what Jesus said is true, but she wants her brother back now. If you've watched the historical TV show The Chosen, the episode of Lazarus, Martha states, "It's a long time to wait." Martha seems to know her theology. Most Jews at that time believed in the resurrection on the last day, even though Old Testament scriptures are vague about death. From Isaiah 26, "But your dead will live, Lord, their bodies will rise. Let those who dwell in the dust wake up and shout for joy. Your dew is like the dew of the morning. The earth will give birth to her dead." And chapters 5 and 6 of John's Gospel, we find Jesus speaking of raising the dead. Martha's heart was right. She knew that Lazarus, her brother, would rise on the last day. She knew the story ending. Jesus is very bold and forthright, and he's speaking with Martha as she is with him. And Jesus doesn't rebuke her for her statement. He confronts the flow of her heart, which is very different on how he speaks with Mary, which we'll find out about in a moment. Instead of looking back at what might have been, Jesus has pointed Martha to the future. But she's missed a central point in which Jesus then responds to her. And in verse 25, Jesus announces his 5th I am statement. I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, I believe you are the Messiah, says Martha. Jesus brings her right into the present. You see, resurrection isn't just a belief. It's not something that's just written down, a future fact. Resurrection is a person. It's me, he says. It's now. You don't have to wait until the end times. I am God and life is in me. Now, if you believe in me, you will live. Jesus had come from God's future into the present mess and chaos and muddle of the world as it was to save us. There is no other resurrection apart from Christ. There is no eternal life apart from Christ. He does more than give life. He is life. And therefore death has no power over him or over those who are in him. And because he lives, we live. In this gospel book of John, there's always a call to believe. And John says we must believe in Jesus. We must be connected to him, and his very life will flow into us. Become connected to the source of life so death can only hold us for a mere moment. Life is not avoiding death. It's overcoming death through the power of Jesus, who is at work in us. Believers in Jesus will experience resurrection because having the life that Jesus gives, it is then impossible for death to defeat them. Both Mary and Martha turned to Jesus in their time of crisis. The temptation might have been just to give up hope and not bother, but they didn't. They sent for Jesus, both trusting in him. Their expectations didn't align with Jesus, but as we know, he gave them something much, much more. And in doing so, started the catalyst of his own ending. How many times might we have asked or prayed, if only you had been here, this wouldn't have happened. If only you've been here, that wouldn't have happened. How many times have we walked away from situations when really in those moments we needed to draw closer to Jesus? We just need to keep on trusting and waiting. We need to lean in and keep connected. We need to keep listening to hear his truth. When we sometimes feel that Jesus is absent, the truth is he is always here. And he remains the truth and the resurrection life. That doesn't change. Tom Wright writes, many of us can't wait to tell Jesus things, to tell him what we think of him. So if any of us have an if only in our hearts at this moment, we need to put ourselves in Martha's shoes and run to meet him. Tell him what we think. Ask him why he didn't come sooner or why he allowed something to happen. We don't know what those answers will be, but we do know that he will meet us in the midst of the situation, the crisis. He will enter the grief and the frustration and the heartbreak, the mess and the muddle of this world. He brings us good news and new hope and life. And all we have to do is say yes, I believe and trust in his truth. Even if we don't understand it all at this moment, a yes is all he needs for now. For some of us, this might be the start of a journey with him. For others, we may be somewhere along the line of that journey. But wherever we are, make him your ultimate resource and don't look back on the if-onlys.
Great, thank you, Julie. So Jesus has spoken to Martha. He said to Martha, I am the resurrection and the life. And so Jesus speaks this truth that goes beyond circumstance. And the truth that we believe as Christians, whatever we face, Jesus is the resurrection and the life. There is always hope in every circumstance. Whatever we face, there is hope because Jesus is the resurrection and the life. And then from verse 28, we see the interaction between Mary and Jesus. We've seen the interaction between Martha and Jesus, and now we see the interaction between Mary and Jesus. And the thing is, as we look at both of these women as they interact with Jesus, both Mary and Martha, the thing that they have in common is that they both ran to Jesus in the midst of their pain and their disappointment. Verse 20, when Martha heard Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him straight away. Verse 29, Mary, when Mary heard Jesus was there, she got up quickly and went to him. And it says in verse 31 that the Jews who had been comforting Mary noticed how quickly she got up. So the people around could see how quickly Mary and Martha turned to Jesus in the midst of their pain and disappointment. And when we face pain and difficulty and disappointment, we have two options. We can run to Jesus, or we can run away from Jesus. We can doubt his power and his compassion, or we can run to him and bring it to him. Mary and Martha give us this example of running to Jesus. They both showed this great faith, didn't they? They both said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. They both had total confidence that Jesus could have stopped Lazarus from dying, that Jesus could have made a difference to their situation. Jesus could have changed things. In verse 32, Mary says, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Total confidence that Jesus could have stopped him from dying. We can learn, can't we, from these interactions, we can learn that we don't have to pretend when we come to Jesus. We don't have to be polite when we come to Jesus. We can come to Jesus and bring him the reality of our pain and our frustration and our difficulty. There's an Italian monk in the Alpha videos. I've watched the Alpha videos many times now. And there's an Italian monk who speaks in the session on prayer. And he says about prayer, he says, keep it real, keep it simple, keep it honest. Keep it real, keep it simple, keep it honest. Mary and Martha were so honest, so real, so simple in their interaction with Jesus. They said, you could have done something, Jesus. You could have done something. And we can say that too. When we face illness and disappointment and bereavement, we can say, you could have done something. We can bring our tears to Jesus. Mary wept. Mary didn't just weep on her own in private. Mary wept in public so everybody could see her weeping. Everyone could see her tears. And Jesus was deeply moved and troubled by Mary's tears. And verse 35 is really famous because it's the shortest verse in the Bible. And it's known. Jesus shows us how to support people in pain. Jesus wept. That's what Jesus did. Jesus, who was with God at the creation of the world, Jesus who is Lord of all, Jesus who is King of kings, Jesus who stills storms and heals the sick, Jesus who feeds 5,000 people and turns water into wine, the same Jesus sat with Mary and saw her tears and wept with her. And he does the same with us. He sits with us and he weeps with us. Jesus didn't say to Mary, have more faith, Mary. Pull yourself together, Mary. It's all going to be okay, Mary. He didn't say that to her. And he didn't even immediately raise Lazarus from the dead. Before Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, Jesus sat with Mary and he wept with her. He felt her pain. And when we face pain and difficulty as Christians, we know the truth that Jesus is coming again. We know the truth that Jesus will one day put everything right. But nevertheless, we can know that Jesus weeps with us, and we can support each other by weeping with each other. In verse 36, the thing that the Jews noticed about Jesus was his love for Lazarus. They said, see how he loved him. I'm so struck as we think of John 11 as a whole, this whole chapter, the whole story of Mary and Martha and Lazarus, I'm so struck by the love of Jesus. And last week, in John 11, verse 5, it says, "Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, and yet he waited and didn't immediately go to help." And then verse 36, the Jews noticed Jesus' love for Lazarus. And it's so tempting when we face pain and difficulty to feel somehow that Jesus has forgotten us. Somehow that Jesus doesn't maybe love us as much as the people he's healed. And John is reminding here that suffering is not in any way an indication of whether or not God loves us. Lazarus was dead. Jesus could have healed Lazarus, and yet it was so clear to everyone that Jesus loved Lazarus. In verse 37, people said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Couldn't he have done that? You see, the spoiler is, next week, we'll see that Jesus did raise Lazarus from the dead. He could have kept Lazarus from dying. Not only could he have kept Lazarus from dying, he's going to intervene after Lazarus has died and raise him from the dead. Jesus is powerful. Jesus can do miracles. Jesus can break in. And it could have made this situation less painful, because it would have been less painful for Mary and Martha if he'd just gone and healed Lazarus. But he allowed this to happen. He didn't go immediately. He did that so that he could be glorified, so that his love and his power could be revealed. And the Message version translates verse 37 like this. Others among them said, "Well, if he loved him so much, why didn't he do something to keep him from dying? After all, he opened the eyes of a blind man. Why didn't he do something?" It's so tempting to believe the lie when we are not seeing miracles that Jesus doesn't love us. But that is a lie. The passage shows us we might not always understand how God is acting, but God does have a bigger picture. Jesus held back. He sat with Mary in her tears. He didn't do the things exactly as Mary and Martha wanted. The ministry of Jesus is a ministry of truth, and it's a ministry of tears. We can run to him, we can turn to him with our questions, and he will speak truth to us. And he will love us, and he will feel our pain, and he will minister to us with power. Shall we stand together now as we respond?